For 50 years, Raju did not know what it meant to walk without pain. Most of us can't imagine losing our freedom for even a single day. But for this elephant, suffering was the only life he had ever known. He spent 5 decades in shackles, abused, starved, and forced to beg on the dusty streets of India. But the reason this story went viral isn't the cruelty. It is the impossible thing Raju did in the middle of the rescue. When the team walked into a death trap to save him, the elephant offered a reaction so rare and so human that it left the world speechless and defied everything experts thought they knew about animals. Raju's life began in tragedy. As a baby, he was poached from the wild, torn away from his mother, and sold into the entertainment trade. Over the years, it is believed he was sold and resold up to 27 times. To his owners, he wasn't a living soul. He was a machine used to make money. His condition was horrific. To keep him submissive, his legs were bound in heavy, spiked chains. The spikes pointed inward, so that every time Raju moved, the metal dug into his flesh. The wounds on his legs never had a chance to heal. They were raw, infected, and covered in abscesses. By 2014, Raju was gaunt and starving. He survived by eating plastic and paper wrappers thrown by tourists. He was alone, in pain, and seemingly forgotten. But he was not. Far away from the streets where Raju begged, a team of wildlife experts was watching. Wildlife SOS, an organization dedicated to saving India's abused and neglected animals, had been tracking Raju's condition for months. Kartik Satyanarayan and his team of rescuers documented the wounds on his legs, the swelling around his joints, the infections that were spreading, and the starvation that was slowly killing him. Every instinct in their bodies screamed at them to run in and stop it. One volunteer gripped the railing, ready to sprint. "We can't just watch this," he hissed. But Kartik, the mission commander, held him back. "If we go in now, we lose him," Kartik warned, tightening his grip on the volunteer's arm. "We only have one shot. If we go in before the judge signs the order, the owner wins, and Raju disappears forever." This was the cruel reality of animal rescue in India. If they moved too soon, without the proper court orders and police support, the owner would simply hide Raju. The elephant would disappear into the vast rural landscape, and they would never find him again. The team had to be patient and professional, gathering the evidence needed to save him. But time was the one thing they didn't have. Raju was 50 years old, and his body was failing. The team knew the brutal truth. Legal battles take years, but infection kills in weeks. If they got stuck in red tape, there wouldn't be an elephant left to save. Finally, in July 2014, the breakthrough happened. The judge signed the warrant. The team didn't waste a second, and the timing was impossible to ignore. It was the night of July 4th. While America celebrated Independence Day, Raju was about to fight for his. Under the cover of darkness, a team of 10 veterinarians and wildlife experts, supported by police, moved in. But as the convoy turned onto the dirt road leading to Raju's location, the headlights revealed a disaster. The owner had been tipped off. He wasn't alone. As the convoy turned the final corner, the headlights revealed a trap. The owner had gathered a mob of 50 men, armed with stones and heavy sticks, blocking the narrow road to the compound. The driver looked at Kartik, panic in his eyes. "They're swarming us. We can't get through." Kartik didn't blink. He grabbed the radio. "Don't stop," he ordered the convoy. "Drive the trucks into the gateway and park them sideways. Seal the entrance and cut the mob off." The drivers slammed on the gas. The heavy trucks roared forward, forcing the crowd to run. They swung the truck sideways across the entrance, bumper to bumper, creating an instant wall of steel. It worked. The mob was locked out. But inside the gates, the danger was even worse. The rescuers were now trapped in a small enclosed courtyard with the owner, his toughest enforcers, and a 5-ton bull elephant. A police officer stepped forward and handed the owner the court order. The man looked at the seal and laughed. He threw the paper into the mud. "You think a piece of paper changes anything?" he screamed, pointing a stick at the trembling giant. "He is my beast. The law stops here. If I tell him to crush you, he will crush you." He grabbed a heavy stick and turned to the elephant. He decided to play his final card and turn Raju into a weapon. He ran to Raju's side and began shouting specific, aggressive commands. These were killer trigger words, commands Raju had been trained to obey for decades. The owner was trying to terrify the elephant, trying to force him to charge at the rescuers. The ground shook. Raju's ears flared out as he slammed his massive body against the chains. The sheer power of the angry animal was terrifying. The owner's henchmen panicked. They scrambled back against the walls, terrified of being trampled. But the rescuers didn't run. "He's shifting weight. He's going to charge," an assistant yelled. "Stand your ground," Dr. Yadaraj, the lead veterinarian, commanded. "Don't run. If you run, he charges." The police raised their rifles, but Dr. Yadaraj signaled them to hold fire. He told them that they hadn't come this far to hurt him. So they stood frozen, defenseless, praying that the soul inside the elephant was still listening. While the owner's men cowered against the walls, Dr. Yadaraj stepped into the light. He walked straight toward the thrashing 5-ton giant. It looked like a suicide mission. But just as the vet reached the angry elephant, Raju did something that silenced the entire compound. Dr. Yadaraj didn't have a weapon. He reached into his pocket and held out the only defense he needed, a handful of fresh fruit. He spoke softly, ignoring the screaming owner. "Easy, old man," he whispered, looking the 5-ton giant in the eye. "I'm not him. Look at me. I'm not him." Despite the commands and the fear, the elephant didn't attack. He lowered his trunk. He sensed that the chaos around him was different this time. It was almost as if he understood that these strangers in the dark were not there to hurt him. They were there to save him. The owner lowered his stick. His weapon had refused to fire. The police seized the moment, grabbing the man and dragging him away from the victim he had tormented for decades. Outside the gates, the flashing lights of police reinforcements scattered the last of the mob. The battle for control was over. But the physical horror was just beginning. As the flashlights hit Raju's legs, the team gasped. The chains weren't just tied around him. They had grown into his skin. The spikes were buried deep inside infected wounds. The team knelt in the mud. It was brutal work. They used heavy hammers to break the rusted iron that had held him for 50 years. Raju didn't flinch. He stood quietly, his trunk hanging low, trembling from exhaustion. He didn't fight the rescuers touching his wounds. He just listened to their soft voices and waited. Then, in the middle of the rescue, something happened that none of them expected. The founder of Wildlife SOS looked up at Raju's face and froze. He signaled the team to stop. He saw something glistening on the elephant's face. Tears were streaming down the elephant's cheeks. Elephants are deeply intelligent and emotional beings. The team didn't believe these were just tears of pain. They were witnessing something rare, so they worked faster, because the tears told them everything they needed to know. Then the final link snapped with a loud crack. The heavy iron crashed into the mud, and for the first time since he was a baby, Raju took a step without pain. He lifted his foot, expecting the sharp bite of the spikes. But there was no pain. He froze, confused. He touched the spot with his trunk, checking if it was real. Raju was free, but he was not safe yet. The chains were off, but they still had to load a 5-ton exhausted giant onto a truck. They had to get him out before the sun came up and the mob regrouped. They lowered the heavy metal ramp. Raju approached it and stopped. He refused to move. "The sun is coming up," the driver shouted, pointing at the horizon. "If the mob sees us, they block the road again." The rescuers were desperate. Force was impossible. If they pushed a panic-stricken elephant, he would slip, break a leg, and the rescue would end in a mercy killing. They tried everything. Melons, bananas, gentle coaxing. Bribes failed as he ignored the fruit. "He's terrified of the noise," a female rescuer said. "He needs to know it's safe." She took a gamble. She walked up the ramp, sat down in the dark belly of the truck, and called to him softly. "Come on," she whispered, patting the straw. "Trust me. Come on." Raju took one tentative step. The metal groaned under 5 tons. He froze. "Don't stop," she urged him. "You're almost there." He took another step, then another. When his feet finally hit the straw-covered floor, the heavy steel door slammed shut. The team collapsed in relief. They had him. The drive was long, but when the truck finally hissed to a halt at the Wildlife SOS Center, the silence was heavy. Kartik stood by the release lever. He didn't give a speech. He just nodded. "Open it up." The ramp lowered. Raju stepped out, not onto concrete, but onto soft earth. He didn't see a cage. He saw open fields and trees. For the first time in 50 years, he took a breath of air that didn't smell of exhaust and garbage. "Welcome home, Raju," Kartik whispered. But the daylight revealed the cost of that freedom. Raju walked a few steps and stopped, swaying. In the harsh sun, the team saw the truth. He was just skin and bone. His spine stuck out against his skin like a razor blade. Dr. Yadaraj moved in instantly. He ran a hand over the elephant's flank and pulled it back covered in pus. The smell hit them first. "It's septic," Yadaraj said, his voice flat and urgent. "The maggots have burrowed into the muscle. Check his temp." "He's burning up," a vet tech shouted. 103 degrees. Dr. Yadaraj looked at the infection and gave a single order. "Start the high-dose antibiotics and get the IVs running. If the sepsis reaches his heart, he won't last the night." The rescue turned into a siege against infection. The team slept in the barn, flushing the wounds every hour. For 3 days, it could have gone either way. Then the fever broke. Slowly, the light returned to Raju's eyes. He discovered the feeding trough. He didn't just eat. He inhaled the watermelons and pumpkins. "He's not stopping," a keeper laughed, watching him shovel green fodder into his mouth. "Let him eat," Kartik smiled. "It's all his." But the real moment of healing happened at the pool. Raju approached the water cautiously. He dipped his trunk in, then a foot. The water was cool and clean. He didn't hesitate. He slid his massive body into the water, submerging completely. He splashed, rolled, and played. He began to heal. But just as Raju started to believe he was safe, a new enemy appeared. 2 months after the rescue, a legal notice arrived at the sanctuary. The former owner, the man who had starved, beaten, and chained Raju for 50 years, wasn't asking for money. He was demanding custody. Kartik read the document and looked up, his face hard. "He's not suing for damages," he told the team. "He's coming for the elephant." The gates were barred. The team stood guard by Raju's pen, day and night, terrified that a truck might pull up at any moment. The idea of putting Raju back in chains was a nightmare they refused to accept. "Let him try," a keeper said, standing between Raju and the gate. "He'll have to go through us." The battle moved from the barn to the high court. It was a landmark case. The owner walked in with a team of lawyers, confident and arrogant. He didn't look at the photos of the wounds. He looked at the judge. "He is my property," the owner argued, cold and unfeeling. "Just like a tractor or a house. You cannot steal a man's livelihood just because the animal cries. I want him back. Today." The room went quiet. The judge looked at the owner calmly and asked a single question. "Where are the papers?" The owner froze. In India, owning an elephant requires a specific legal certificate. For 50 years, the owner had poached, traded, and enslaved Raju without a single valid document. He thought his power was enough. "I have owned him since he was a calf," the owner stammered. "I don't need a piece of paper." The judge looked at the evidence of cruelty on the desk. Then he looked back at the man. "Without a certificate, this is not ownership," the judge ruled. "It is poaching. The custody claim is rejected." The courtroom erupted. The owner stormed out, defeated by his own arrogance. Raju was free, legally, physically, and permanently. The judge had declared him free. The owner was banished. But you can't erase 50 years of terror with a piece of paper. The iron chains were gone, but the invisible ones were still holding him hostage. For 18,000 nights, Raju had slept standing up. His shackles had been so short and the spikes so sharp that if he tried to lie down, they would tear his flesh. Even in the soft sand of the sanctuary, safe and warm, Raju slept leaning against a wall. He didn't know how to lie down. He was afraid to. The rescuers watched him on the CCTV cameras every night, waiting for him to trust the silence. Then, at 3 a.m., a few weeks after the verdict, the breakthrough happened. Raju's knees buckled. He tested the ground with his trunk. He waited for the pain of the spikes. But it never came. Slowly, with a deep groan of comfort, the 5-ton giant collapsed. He stretched his legs out fully. He laid his head on a mound of soft earth. And for the first time in half a century, Raju fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. He had learned to rest. Now he had to learn to live. In the wild, bull elephants are often solitary. But Raju had spent a lifetime in isolation. He needed a family. The team introduced him to the Lucky Ladies, a herd of rescued females. He was terrified at first. But they didn't push him. They surrounded him, touching him gently with their trunks, welcoming him into the fold. He wasn't just safe, he was loved. Today, Raju is still at the sanctuary. He spends his days walking through open fields, swimming in his pool, and sleeping soundly every night. He can never get those 50 years back. But thanks to the bravery of a team that refused to give up, Raju the elephant will never wear chains again.